Okay, and today we've popped over to the village or town of Thaxted in Essex. It used to be a town, but I think it's now classified as a village, which is largely timber framed and medieval, but in very close proximity to Stansted Airport. And what I like about Thaxted is the architecture and history. I mean, for example, we're going to cross over the road now, and I'm going to take you to where the composer Gustav Holst lived. And here it is. Whether you can see the little plate up there, but here's a picture in case you can't. Gustav Holst lived here 1917 to 1925. Gustav Holst was a famous English composer, and whilst he was here he worked at the church. I believe he was their organist, and we'll be visiting the church very shortly. And I believe some of these famous compositions were written here. Those that I can tell you now I can't off the top of my head, to be perfectly honest. But he was very busy composing. He stayed here for a few years and he moved on. This is one of a number of places he went to. And this particular house was his at that time of history. And as we walk a little bit further up the road, and ahead of us we can see in perfect detail is the old Guildhall. Now, Thaxted, unlike most other towns, for example we went to Lavenham, their fortune was built on war. Thaxted's fortune was actually built on knives. It was a cutler's town, and its wealth was largely founded on that. And here we have this beautiful medieval timber framed moot hall, which is open at the bottom, where they used to trade in the old days. And if we wander around a little bit and give you a better view, as you can see, it's an absolutely exquisite building. And so much history attached to it. And up the side there is a small short road that leads up to the church, and we'll be popping in there, as I said, very shortly. I'll cross over the road and just give you a view of the inside of the moot hall base. You can see the lock up there where drunks and people and common thieves used to be incarcerated. Seems to be very popular.
Just rescued a drunk and
Have you?
oh, we found one or two.
So many drunks around here, isn't there?
Yeah,
We'll pop down there in a minute once these dear people have got through. This is the Thaxted lockup in the Guildhall. And let's go downstairs. A model of the Guildhall. Press the button. Does it work? Nope. I'll presume that's some part of the display which isn't working. It's very dark down here. Someone weaving here. But again, the light is very, very poor. At least you can see the foundations of the building, which is built as flint and brick. And some of the items which were produced here. go back up and back out onto the street again. Just a quick scan of the street from here. Okay, the last view of the Guild Hall as we progress up this small side road and we go up towards the church. It's interesting that wandering around the museum, they had exhibits on basically weaving, and yet it's, as I said earlier, its real fame was built upon the cutlery trade, making knives and such items. But obviously most of these places utilise various different aspects of crafts in order to survive, to make money, but I'll have to look further into that. But walking up here, we're coming towards the church, and this church is absolutely magnificent. And this of course was the church that Gustav Holst was employed as the organist. And what a magnificent building it is, and look at the view here. Some years ago I was wandering around in here in the scrub, and I actually found a human skull, a child's human skull, that had been unearthed from a pauper's grave. Apparently been dug up by wild animals, and if you can see there, you can see where animals have been scratching the surface. Apparently there's a herd of deer that come in here, and they were digging the ground up looking for roots, and obviously they unearthed this poor child's body. Nobody knew who he was when he died. It was just one of those many unmarked graves that are here today. That in itself is such a tragedy. This is a magnificent portico gateway. Look at this. But the entrance is round the other side from memory. And if we get time, we'll wander down to the windmill. And here's the church tower. The only distraction for most people coming here is the fact that it's on the main flight route into Stansted Airport, and on average there's a flight every 10 minutes coming across the top of the village. These houses here that we're looking at are the original almshouses. I think the chantry was where the the vicar, Conrad Null vicar, in 1933. He was known as the Red Priest, but he had very strong left-wing views. And what we can't see at the moment, because we're not actually inside the church, is the fact that all the medieval seating, the pews, have all been ripped out. That was the work of the vicar. And today it's used for a number of festivals, because the acoustics in there are absolutely superb for live performances. And when they ever have any kind of festivities in this area, generally speaking, the church is involved in some way or another with a show or with a performance of some kind. Going through this little gate. Isn't that sweet? Very touristy, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And we're walking down by the side of the churchyard still.
Looks a bit like the Cotswolds.
It does actually, yeah. And you've got this lovely row of cottages facing over the cemetery.
This is the modern.
The modern cemetery, yeah. And ahead of us is John Webb's windmill. There's little roads that snake off from here, as you can see here. And some more houses down there. And where we've just come from, quite literally. Hiya.
Hello.
And then ahead of us is the windmill. A number of the cottages here are thatched. And it's interesting to note that most of the thatching material actually comes from Romania, from Eastern Europe. The common mistake is that people enter the gate here to go to the windmill, but in fact it's part of the cemetery, when in fact we've got to go through this gate, which will take us to the windmill itself. And what a beautiful day to do this on our trip to Thaxted. We've actually been down into the museum, and you've missed that, haven't you?
Yes, I missed that.
One had disappeared.
Inside a small shop.
She went into a clothes shop and disappeared in there.
It was clothes and gifts and a lot of
Yeah.
beautiful things. Unfortunately, the ladies are absolutely terrible at
I actually went in there
manners.
and asked if you'd been there, and they looked at me indignantly and said, yes, she's gone. Oh, this area's been closed off again. Look at this. The curse of the red and white tape.
But this is due to damage after the recent storms.
And there's the windmill, or the back end, but we can still look at the windmill from the other side. So if we wander around here and we go into the field, you can get a better view of the windmill at the front end, which is probably the bit that you want to see. And over here we have this, well, basically a very sweeping and panoramic view of Thaxted. Certainly one of my favourite villages, and the valley from here is wondrous. Okay, so you have windmills right at the top of the hill. And she's overlooking this beautiful sweeping valley. I mean, look at the view here, folks. Isn't this absolutely gorgeous? I'm going to be naughty here. I'm not going to tread on the farmer's crops. I'm going to be very, very careful so I can give you a better view of the windmill. What a beautiful structure. It's a tower windmill because it's built as a brick tower. The fans that are fitted to it, or the sails I think is the correct terminology, they actually broke some years ago in heavy storms, because it is very, very susceptible to wind damage, being where it is on top of a hill. And in that case, the wood that replaced it was mahogany, which I think was from the West Indies. So at least that way, strength-wise, it should last for a lot longer. And of course, it was completely restored by a famous millwright. And what a beautiful building it is, isn't it? It's also a museum. Okay, let's get back out of the wind. And over the background, you can just see the tower of the church. So when you see the two together in focus, it's a really, really wonderful view. It really is. So there you have the windmill, and there you have the tower of the church. Isn't that just beautiful? Let's just walk across here. Give you another view of the windmill as we walk past. We're going to have to walk back this way again, unfortunately, unless we can get through the churchyard. I think we can actually.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Let's go this way then. And that is John Webb's wonderful windmill. I think it dates to about 1824 from memory. So we're actually in the extension to the extended cemetery, because the cemetery we just passed earlier was the first, and this is the second extension. I won't film any of the graves out of respect for the dead. One last view of the windmill. Isn't that exquisite? Such a beautiful building. I do have a weakness for windmills and church spires. So you get the best of both worlds here, rather, with the spire of the church and John Webb's wonderful windmill. I think we have to go through this side gate here. Marijuana. I wonder if the service is finished at the church. If it hasn't, we'll have to postpone it to a little bit later.
Yes.
We're going to go for a well-earned drink, aren't we?
Yes, well-earned beer.
We're well-earned beer at the pub across the road. And we're going back the same way in which we came, but it gives you a nice view, doesn't it? I can imagine many of you are drooling, and so am I actually. I'd love to live here. Has the kind of ambience that I like. Looks like a number of yew trees have been chopped down.
Yes.
There's a few stumps there, just to show people. They were probably,
I wonder why, because
the winds probably damaged them.
They almost probably be damaged, but
Yeah. It's a lovely house, isn't it? And of course the beckoning spire of the church. And we're back to the old cemetery. And here comes another flight into Stansted Airport. If there's anything that would put me off living in Thaxted, I think that would probably be it. But beside all of that, it is a beautiful place to live, as you can see. So I'm quite envious of anybody that can live here. And it's now 3:15. And is the benches empty at the front? Probably not.
Doesn't look like it.
No, they'd be there all day, wouldn't they?
So they were around there.
Yeah. We're going to sit where that lady is. We can ask her, she can say yes or no. Anyway, we're going to go off camera now and we'll be back very, very shortly. I must follow Warner. Well, everybody, I'm now inside Thaxted Church. And as you can see, there's a number of memorial plates. It has a beautiful atmosphere in here. It is almost cathedral-like in its size. I'll just take you across and show you the layout. They've just had a service here, so I'm going to be very quiet. And the organ is absolutely magnificent. What date, excuse me, what date is the organ?
What date is the organ? Which one do you want to know? This one?
This one here, yeah. Oh, you got two in here.
I've got one up there.
Oh,
Much more important.
really? Well, yeah. So this one would be what? How would this one be?
This one, these pipes relate to the organ that is there,
1708.
and they've been refurbished
Wow.
over the course of time in memory of a previous vicar of Thaxted.
And the other organ dates.
That's from 1800s. That's a very special one that has one of very few in the whole country by Lincoln, the name of the gentleman, and it came here. We celebrated 200 years of it last year.
Wow, that's a long time in use, isn't it? And that is a beautiful organ. But I'd like to include both.
That is very special because it's a Georgian one, and therefore it's rather different in the manner in which it was built and the way it was played.
You should have tidied me up.
Gustav Holst and John Webb.
Oh, that's the organ that he played on.
Yes.
I actually did a piece on Gustav earlier. Did he write? He wrote the Planet Suite.
It is indeed. That's his most
Yeah.
famous one, yes.
Was that written here or?
Whilst he was living down in the house that you will see with a blue plaque on it,
Yes, that's right.
he wrote some of it. Mars is reckoned to be one of those who started here. He also lived further out before he came to live here, and he was taking time off from his work at St Paul's Girls' School during war. And he came here with St Paul's Girls' School and Morley College, where he taught as well, in 1916, first Whitsuntide Festival here.
I remember reading about him. He was seen often around Thaxted, playing through the music, humming it as he was walking along. So he must have got a lot of inspiration from this church and the village itself, yeah. But let's go and have a look at the organ. Oops, sorry. And here is the main piece, which dates from the 1800s. And what a beautiful organ that is. And this is the organ that Gustav Holst played on. As I mentioned earlier, he was the church organist. Wow, so much history here. I love Holst's work. This is so beautiful. I'll take up into the roof of the church. It's lucky in the sense that it still has one of its brasses, because in years past people stole these brasses, and particularly some of the iconoclasts. Here we still have the brass, but we don't have the name of the person who is interred here. But the fact the brass is here is quite amazing, because if we step over to the next plate, you can quite clearly see the brass has been removed. There's so much history here. Anyway, I digress. This is a very historic church. I think this church took about 150 years to build. And until recently, one of its biggest problems was it was leaking, and there was always an appeal to carry out repairs. But anyway, I'm going to have to leave you on this because I'm almost running out of battery on this. But for now, I'll just continue until eventually it gives up. What a beautiful pulpit. Just scan around the church very slowly. The galleried aisles. So you have 3 chapels here. You have the main one. You have 2 side chapels. One will be, I think this is the Lady Chapel here. And then across here we have another side chapel. And here we are. Excellent. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to call it a day here. I hope that you've enjoyed our wander around Thaxted, and certainly will get any opportunity to come and visit Thaxted for yourself and take in some of the splendid views that we shared with you today. Anyway, until next time, thank you.